pot. Might be enough for a pie!
At this point in time, the Lord of the Rings franchise needs little to no introduction. 75 years after its inception, it's arguably the most recognizable franchise in the world, regardless of genre and medium. Needless to say, its impact on pop culture and the fantasy genre reverberates through space and time, as its touch can be felt in almost every work of high fantasy that's come out since, regardless of the medium. There might be many of you watching this video today who are longtime fans or newer Tolkien heads. We welcome you all to join us as we explore the wonderful lands of Arda and its denizens, both good and evil. J.R.R. Tolkien has created a living, breathing world of fantastical creatures, all with their own distinct cultures, many of whom we've already discussed on this channel. Both Morgoth and Sauron, the two dark lords of this universe, have under them numerous evil creatures that they've bred to do their bidding. From demons of fire and shadow called Balrogs, to dragons to orcs, and even wraiths who are neither living nor dead called the Nazgul, there is no shortage of nightmarish fiends waiting to devour your body, mind, and soul within Tolkien's legendarium. While some are beings of extreme cunning like the dragons Smaug and Glaurung, there are others, like the trolls, for whom intelligence isn't really their forte. In today's video, we're going to explore the latter, brutish creatures bred by the first Dark Lord Morgoth and perfected by his successor Sauron. These were no under-the-bridge dwelling trolls that existed in popular myths across Europe. These were brutes that dwelt in Angband, the dread fortress of Morgoth, and later throughout Middle-earth. Trolls originally belonged to Nordic folklore, from which Tolkien draws a lot of inspiration for the Lord of the Rings as a whole. They've been traditionally portrayed as dim-witted brutes throughout history, but Tolkien's version of these creatures isn't that simplistic. In the Tolkien legendarium, they come in different varieties, all of which we'll discuss today. From their mysterious origins, physiology, and place in the lore, there will be no stone left unturned today regarding these hulking behemoths. So, without wasting any more time, let's dive right into the land of Middle-earth and explore the creature that perfectly fits the age-old adage, all bronze, no brains, the troll. Before we get into our explanation though, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The creation of trolls in the Lord of the Rings. Who are they? We don't know much about the exact origins of the trolls. Unlike orcs and the other evil creatures created by Morgoth who have well-defined origins, trolls, despite appearing at several key moments in the lore, haven't been given the same treatment. The first time we hear of them is during the Nerneath Arno-Dyad, or the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, where they first appear alongside Gothmog as his special guard before they drag her into Angband. The idea of being able to create something, especially a sentient being in Tolkien's world, is not to be taken lightly, as the ability lies solely with the primary deity of the universe called Eru Ilúvatar. Any other creatures, like the Ents and the Dwarves created by the Valar, are only considered alive because they were given true life by Eru. The Valar, Eul, and Manwë might have shaped these creatures, but they couldn't be counted amongst the living if not for the grace of Eru Ilúvatar. The Dark Lord Morgoth wanted to create a life of his own too, and this was his original sin. He tried looking for an item called the Flame Imperishable, which was said to grant its user the power to create sentient beings. What he didn't know was that the flame was merely an aspect of Ilúvatar's power of creation. As such, it dwelt within the great god. This was the primary reason for his fall from grace, as he was filled with malice and hatred for being denied this gift. After descending to Arda and claiming lordship over its lands, Morgoth immediately sets out to corrupt and twist the creation of Eru into pale imitations of their former beauty and grace. After the Battle of Dagor Aglareb, where his forces were absolutely crushed by the coalition of the elves and men, Morgoth realized that with mere orcs, he had no hope of ever defeating the children of Ilúvatar and establishing his dominion over Arda. He realized that he needed creatures far more dangerous than what he had at his disposal. Outside of the orcs, the only unit that he had that had any noticeable power was the Balrogs, and even a single Balrog was a foe that was a match for even the strongest of elves and men, but they were few in numbers and not at all expendable. The might of the elves in those days was great, and as terrifying as a Balrog is, some of the elves of the older days were powerful enough to take down these demons by themselves, although normally at the cost of their own life. As such, Morgoth couldn't risk the Balrogs in combat just to support orcs all the time. During the watchful peace that descended upon Beleriand as the aftermath of Dagor Aglareb for 400 years, Morgoth set to devising newer and more formidable creatures. In Trolls, Morgoth created an expendable unit that could perform the job of a shock trooper a role previously filled by Balrogs. They also possessed a negligible amount of intelligence, which made it easy for them to be controlled. With it being established that Morgoth was only able to corrupt and twist the creations of Eru, we are told by Treebeard, the Ent in the Third Age, that the trolls were created in mockery of the Ents. While the Orcs were twisted and corrupted elves who had been transformed, we wonder if the same process occurred with the Ents. The Ents resemble the trees that they care for and are in no way, shape, or form similar to the trolls, other than the fact that they're both extremely strong. Maybe this was a mere conjecture made by the Ent, but knowing how long-lived they are, it could very well be the truth as well. Considering the fact that Morgoth needs something to corrupt in order to create something, and given the fact that he's a literal god and the most powerful being in the Tolkien verse outside of Eru, it is well within the realms of possibility. We're also told that Morgoth created them out of stone, and what Treebeard could have meant is that the Dark Lord only attempted to copy the strength and stature of the Ent, and in mockery of them, created these creatures out of rocks and stone and animated. This could be a more plausible theory, as the earlier trolls turn into stones when exposed to sunlight. The tree Ents aren't of flesh and blood, but are associated with nature, so Melkor, in order to intimidate and mock them, might have created his own creation out of stone, which also occurs in nature, but is dead, unlike the plant parts that the Ents are made of. Formidable physiology of trolls. Created as a mockery of the Ents, trolls were large, hulking humanoids with little to no intelligence. Their bodies were covered with thick hides that allowed them to tank attacks that would easily fell most enemies. We've seen trolls remaining largely unaffected even after being cut multiple times and stuck with numerous arrows. During the Fellowship's battle with the cave troll in Moria, Boromir's sword not only glances off the troll's skin, but the impact also leaves a notch on his blade. For being so huge, their movements are surprisingly well coordinated, especially those of Olog High, bred by Sauron in the later days. The trolls of Morgoth, while not capable of speech, had the intelligence required to be used as Gothmog's chief bodyguards. Their physiology enables them to survive the harsh environments that they dwell in. Outside of the Ettenmoors around which they dwelt during the early Third Age, during the First and Second Age, and later in the War of the Rings, the trolls lived in perhaps the most unhospitable and toxic areas of Middle-earth. Trust us, you wouldn't want to be buying real estate anywhere in Angbad or Mordor. Trolls also have a keen sense of smell, being able to sniff out their prey quite easily. Speaking of prey, needless to say, their giant physiology is sustained through a carnivorous diet of the worst kind. While the trolls that Bilbo and the dwarves encounter on their way to Erebor seem to have developed a taste for finer Epicurean delights by troll standards, most trolls have no qualms about what flesh they devour and how they do it. Outside of the snow trolls, most other trolls have hairless bodies. They have nostrils but no noses like the ones you would see on men, elves, and even orcs. In terms of gear, while most trolls appear without any gear as their hides are thick enough to provide them with protection against most weapons, the ones under Sauron's service and Gothmog's bodyguards wore armor. This was kinda overkill because the trolls, who were already hard to slay without any armor on, now became almost unkillable by most ordinary soldiers. Another important thing to note about trolls is the fact that they're extremely weak to sunlight. While most of the evil creatures of Morgoth shrank in fear from the light of the moon and the sun when they first showed up in the sky, over time they would lose this fear. For trolls, however, the fear of the light of the sun extended further than just the fear of the unknown, as it was fatal to most of their kind. If exposed to sunlight, they would turn into stone irrevocably. The Olog High of Sauron would eventually overcome this weakness. The history of trolls in the Lord of the Rings lore. Despite their somewhat murky origins, trolls are present throughout the Lord of the Rings lore. Although their first recorded appearance is in the Nerneath Arnodiad, we can assume that they were already a part of Morgoth's army from the Battle of Dagor Bragola and the breaking of the Siege of Angband. After the War of Wrath, which saw the forces of Morgoth scatter and flee to the darkest and furthest corners of the world, the trolls came to settle to the north of the Misty Mountains. Their area would soon become the abode of the Witch King of Angmar, the captain of the Nazgul, or Ringwraiths as they were known in the common tongue. There, in the realm of Angmar, they would thrive and work against the mortal races after the rise of their new master, Sauron. Around the year 2930 of the Third Age, a group of hill trolls would capture and kill Arador, the chieftain of the Dunedain and Aragorn's grandfather, later known as King Elisar. The Dunedains were people who were the remnants of what remained of the now extinct western realm of Arnor. Initially known collectively as the Kingdom of Arnor and Gondor, it was the seat of the High King of Men in its early days. Later, Arnor would become fragmented into smaller kingdoms and eventually dissolve altogether, thanks mainly to their constant war against Angmar. Unlike the other armies of Sauron, in Angmar, his armies consisted of a lot of trolls, as there were plenty in the area. The trolls therefore proved instrumental in the downfall of the kingdom, reducing the remaining survivors to rangers led by a chieftain and not a king. Later, in the Third Age, during the quest for Erebor, Thorin Oakenshield, along with Bilbo and company, would encounter 3 trolls on their journey. It was unusual for trolls to be so far from the Edenmoors, but here they were, and according to Gandalf, these were ill omens and signified that evil was stirring once again. He would be right, because around this time, a shadow had fallen over the Greenwood, which folks had begun to call Mirkwood, and the fortress of Dol Guldur near it. It was said a powerful human necromancer had taken up abode there, and it would prove to be much later that this necromancer was none other than Sauron, who had returned after his fall during the siege of Barad-dûr. These 3 trolls, Bert, Tom, and Bill, had captured the group, but being oafs, they couldn't decide how to best eat them. One wanted to squash them, the other wanted to make a stew, and the remaining one wanted to roast them. Bilbo and the dwarves, using their sharp wit, created discord among the trolls by presenting contradictory theories on the best way to cook themselves. The trolls, being stupid, aren't able to make up their mind and begin arguing amongst themselves until dawn, and as the first ray of light hits them, they turn into stone statues. Later, while journeying through the same area almost 70-odd years later, the Fellowship of the Ring encounters the statues of Bert, Tom, and Bill, still frozen there all those years later. Later on, as the Fellowship is journeying through the mines of Moria, they come across the tomb of Balin, one of Bilbo's companions who had set out to recolonize Moria. His quest had ended in abject failure, with everyone in his party, himself included, dying at the hands of the evil creatures that now occupied Moria. When the Fellowship enters the chamber of Mazar Bul, where the records were kept in the ancient days for the Dwarven city, they're beset by the enemy led by a cave troll. In the movie, this cave troll manages to stab Frodo with a spear, which leaves the rest of the group to believe that he's died. Well, in fact, he had survived thanks to the mithril shirt Bilbo had given him. This event in the books transpires somewhat differently. While there is a cave troll, Frodo manages to wound it deeply on the foot with his sword sting, causing the creature to retreat. The books, Frodo is actually stabbed by a giant orc chieftain and not a troll. During the Battle of Pelennor Field, as the forces of Sauron lay siege upon the city of Minas Tirith, 4 trolls would swing the battering ram called Grond, named after Morgoth's weapon, on the door of the city and breach it. During the penultimate battle of the War of the Rings, the forces of the Free People of Middle-earth stood in front of the Black Gate to face the full force of Mordor in order to buy Frodo precious time to destroy the ring. They would be attacked by a large company of trolls. These trolls were equipped with heavy hammers and bucklers, and they cut a swath through the forces of Gondor and Rohan. However, Pippin would manage to kill the captain of these trolls by stabbing him with the blade he had taken from the Barrow Downs as he stooped to kill Baragrond, a guard of the citadel. Thus, as you can see, the trolls appear consistently throughout the lore and are very much an important part of the Tolkien legendarium.
Look at him. Let's just sit on him and squash him into jelly.
Why do some trolls speak while others are mute? The reason why some trolls like Bert, Tom, and Bill can speak while the others of their kind are mute is because Sauron, in his bid to make the trolls more formidable, conducted numerous experiments on them. One of these resulted in them gaining some level of intelligence which they used to pick up a rudimentary version of the languages used around them. This is why these 3 trolls can be seen using a crude version of the Western tongue to communicate. They also picked up what little communication skills they could from the Orcs. The Olog High of Mordor, however, only spoke in the black speech of that land. Can trolls reproduce? This is another very contentious topic that Tolkien never really expounded upon. We know that orcs are twisted and corrupted versions of the elves, and due to this, they can reproduce like the rest of the children of Ilúvatar. By this logic, trolls should be able to do the same, as they were created in mockery of the Ents. The problem lies in the fact that we don't know if they were created by corrupting the Ents or if Sauron merely created their form and animated. When the 3 trolls turn into stone, we're told that they have turned back into what they were made of. This heavily implies what we just mentioned is true. Therefore, being creatures who aren't truly alive, they are most likely created artificially through some sorcery and hence cannot reproduce. Types of trolls in the Lord of the Rings lore. Cave trolls. As their name suggests, these were trolls that preferred dwelling in the deep, dark places of the earth. They had distinctly dark green skin made of scales with flat noses and toeless feet. As the one that we in the Fellowship encountered lacked the ability to talk, we can assume that it was one of the trolls that fled after the War of the Wrath into the deepest and darkest corners of Middle-earth. Another thing that supports this theory is that most trolls with whom Sauron came in contact with, or bred, had the ability to talk, which the cave troll in Moria didn't. We can also infer that the physical description we just gave is unique to the cave troll because Gandalf could immediately recognize it in a glance. As the trolls had a general fear of sunlight, it made sense that cave trolls would exist, as this biome would allow them to operate without having to worry about being turned into stone. Hill trolls. A large number of these trolls dwelt within the northern region of Middle-earth near Angmar. This was the breed of trolls that played a pivotal role in the Witch King's campaigns against Arnor. They were larger than most trolls with hardened skin that was capable of breaking ordinary steel if struck with. The hill trolls were responsible for killing Eredor, the 14th chieftain of the Dunedain and Aragorn's grandfather. They were also let loose during the final battle of the Black Gate. We believe that Sauron took their stock to create his infamous Olog High. These trolls were also the ones who were the most experimented upon and therefore possessed increased weakness, strength, and the ability to communicate. We can safely say the hill trolls were no mindless brutes like their cave-dwelling cousins. Mountain trolls. These trolls were great in size, even by troll standards. While they were used in combat, Sauron used them primarily to undertake tasks that required a great deal of strength and labor. For instance, they were used to swing the battering ram Grond at the gates of Minas Tirith, and they were also used to operate the levers that controlled the opening and closing of the enormous black gates that led into Mordor. Since most troll species seem to get their name from the preferred choice of dwelling, it's largely assumed that the mountain trolls get their name as they come down from the Misty Mountains where they supposedly lived. That said, it would hardly be a surprise if they got their name because of their enormous size. Regardless, these creatures are mentioned only once in the written records of the history of Middle-earth, and much of their lore is steeped in darkness. Olog High. These were perhaps the most dangerous species of trolls to ever exist on Middle-earth. When we break down their name, Log roughly translates to troll, and High roughly translates to folks. They appeared towards the end of the Third Age in the southern region of Mirkwood and in the mountainous frontiers of Mordor during the War of the Rings. These trolls were bred by Sauron to be much stronger than all of the other species. The other species suffered because of their weaknesses, such as sunlight and stupidity. The Olog High were capable of operating at 100% even in daylight, and they were extremely cunning. They were fully capable of deceit and complex battle strategies. They were such a far cry from the other trolls that many of them who didn't know of their origins assumed them to be a variant of the Orcs instead. They were, of course, much larger than the largest Uruks and definitely came from troll stock. In the books, they're described as having horn scales on their skin and carrying bucklers and hammers for weapons. They also conversed only in the Black Tongue of Mordor. These Olog High formed a massive part of Sauron's offensive towards the end of the war. Most of these creatures would be destroyed after the Dark Lord's fall, however, and the fate of those who survived isn't explored further.
Flesh. I need flesh.
Stone Trolls. This is the species that the iconic trio Tom, Bert, and Bill belong to. They were smaller in size than the Olog High, but were around the same size as a cave troll. They seem to have been touched by the wickedness of Sauron as they possessed the ability to communicate in crude Western, though their intelligence was sorely lacking. As seen by the fate of the trio, they are extremely vulnerable to sunlight and turn into stone when exposed to it. Two-headed Trolls. While we never encounter this variant of trolls in any of the books by Tolkien, a passing reference is made to them by the narrator when talking about the stone troll, Bill. The narrator tells us, yes, I'm afraid trolls do behave like that, even those with only one head each. Whether the two heads are supposed to measure their intelligence, implying they're twice as intelligent, or if it really refers to a troll with two heads is mostly left to our imagination. If such a creature existed, it would be extremely rare. We do see them appear mostly in numerous video games based on the Lord of the Rings, but outside of that, their existence is highly debated. Snow Trolls. This is yet another species of trolls that have only been referenced in statement, used to describe Helm Hammerhand. During the Great Winter that enveloped Rohan during his time, when he was forced to defend a siege against the Dunlending at the Hornburg, the Great King would emerge from the fortress nightly, destroy all his enemies, and loot their provisions like a snow troll. We, however, don't ever encounter a real snow troll during our journeys through Middle-earth. Just like the two-headed troll, this simple reference has been used by artists and creators to create adaptations of the creature in works based on The Lord of the Rings. Are the trolls immortal? This is a question that's extremely problematic, and its answer depends on what you believe to be true concerning their origins. If the trolls are creatures animated by enchantments and not truly living, how can you kill that which isn't truly alive? However, if we're to consider this form of life as living, trolls could be considered immortal unless killed. We're not explicitly told what a troll's lifespan is, as most lose their lives in battle or due to their own stupidity, so for all intents and purposes, we can believe that the trolls are immortal unless slain, or at the very least, they are extremely long-lived. Who would win? The Ents versus the Trolls. Since the trolls were created as a mere mockery of the Ents, and from what we've seen with Melkor's creatures that were created to spite the creations of Eru, the Ents will handily defeat the trolls any day of the week. Even Treebeard, the Ent who divulges the intention behind Morgoth's creation of the trolls, tells us that in a contest of strength, the Ents would come out on top. The Ents are able to tear apart rocks and stones as if they were tearing a piece of paper. The troll, being supposedly created out of rocks and stone, has no chance. Maybe the Olog High would prove to be a worthy adversary, but they too would stand no chance against the Ents. These tree herders are able to storm Isengard while Saruman still remains within the Tower of Orthanc. They defied the strength of an Istar, even though he was a fallen one, no less powerful. One cannot imagine the trolls having the strength and fortitude or the intelligence to defy one of the wizards. The only reason Orthanc remains standing is because the stone that it was made out of wasn't of an earthly origin. The Ents are superior in almost every way to the trolls, and this would be a wipeout in favor of the Ents if the two races ever engaged in an all-out war. Marvelous verdict! The trolls of Middle-earth were fearsome creatures that terrorized the lands from their inception in the First Age all the way to the end of the Third Age. It's unclear what their fate was in the Fourth Age of the world after the fall of the second Dark Lord Sauron. They must have lingered for a while before they were hunted into extinction by the forces of good. They're a perfect example of the will of their creator, Morgoth, as they are such a far cry from the complexity and beauty of the Ents that he intended to corrupt and copy. The fact that they turned out to be as stupid as they were really shows how pathetic Morgoth was in his attempts at imitation. We hope that with this video, we've granted you insight into one of the most dangerous creatures to stalk the lands of Middle-earth. Out of Morgoth and Sauron's menagerie of creatures, few are as destructive as the trolls. We have, however, come to the end of this video, and we'd like to thank you for sticking with us right to the very end. We have many more videos on our channel on the Lord of the Rings universe, from character analyses to lore breakdowns, so be sure to check those out when you're done here. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. This is Wizard Wheezy signing off for now, but stay safe out there. Thanks for watching, and have a marvelous day.